Hello, and welcome to our podcast, October 26th. This is the Playoff Preview Special.
Boom.
Didn't think you would see that coming, did you?
We pivoted.
Yes, we have pivoted in a major direction here. We're starting with this Playoff Preview Special, but from now on, I believe this podcast will be exclusively college football.
No baseball.
No NFL.
No basketball.
No soccer.
And don't ask again, Abby, because we are not doing the Winter Olympics.
Nope, that's out the window now. So, yeah, we're making a major change here at BYSC Podcast.
And we've heard feedback from our viewers, and by viewers I mean we've heard feedback from ourselves, and we don't want to do the other sports. We're good with just college football.
We seem to get the most excited for college football. We seem to spend the most time on it, and we just think that we could provide more quality, a better quality podcast if we just focused on college football.
So that's what we're going to do, and you're going to like it.
Yeah, in the off season, you may find us doing some other projects, maybe a different podcast over different subjects, but we'll talk more about that when we get closer to it. Right now, we're focused on college football and the upcoming college football playoff.
That's right. We're a little over halfway through the season, and we're going to do our mid-season check-in anyways, and kind of see who we think is going to end up being in the playoffs, who we think the top four really are now, and kind of see who has a chance, who doesn't.
Yep. And the committee, next week, it comes out with their first ranking, so we'll see if they agree with us. This will be up before the committee, so if we give the top four that the committee gives, then just, call us psychic or whatever.
They will more than likely come consult us before making a final decision. So
yeah,
pretty exciting times for us.
They conference us in.
So we're going to go ahead and just start off with who we think ends up in the playoffs. And then we're going to go conference by conference and talk about why we think that. And kind of go from there. And we'll try not to make it too stale. We'll keep it interesting. We'll keep it quick. Not get caught up too much on one single team. At least I'm going to say that we probably will do all of those things.
Yeah, let's just hit them with our top four.
Number one, real shocker, Bama.
Well, let's see. Okay, no, that works. I was going to say if you want to hit them with a current and then your final predicted, but
you had the current from everybody. I had basically the same current. So I'm going to say my official predictions for the playoffs. Also, it doesn't really matter now, I don't think, because everyone's thinking the same thing. I don't think anyone really, besides one of our surveys, said something slightly different, but it's the same four for...
You are correct. Only one of them had a different one. It was number 4. One of our friends, Travis, had Wisconsin. Everybody else had TCU as their 4.
Someone who thinks Wisconsin is the 4th best team in the nation is probably about as smart as someone who leaves their car unlocked in a bad area.
Wow. Hitting them below the belt.
Right in the ankles. All right, so number 2 in the country makes it to the playoffs, Penn State. I don't think those two change from now.
Okay.
Number 3, Notre Dame. I don't even like them, but they've been they're one against USC, which I think is overrated. I've always said that, but I still think their win against them was very impressive, and they might be able to take that momentum through the rest of the season. And then lastly, TCU. I don't think they get shafted this year.
There will be no need for them to get shafted because they will not make the top 4. Just a prediction. We'll get to mine right now. My current top 4, as I predict what if all 4 of these teams win this weekend, what the committee will have as the top 4 next week. Alabama, Penn State, the Georgia Bulldogs, and the TCU Horned Frogs. I think those 4 have the best resumes right now if they win their games this week. My predicted Final 4, we'll get to the analysis later, but my predicted Final 4 of the season. Alabama.
All right.
Clemson.
Dumb.
Georgia.
All right.
And Ohio State.
Dumb.
If you recall, our first and I believe only DebateGate was Penn State versus Ohio State during our college football preview special. And that comes to
fruition.
It comes to fruition this week.
It's going to be exciting times.
Penn State versus Ohio State. I have Ohio State still.
And I have Penn State.
Yes, that is your official upset of the week since we're keeping track for next week and keeping track of the records.
Well, hey, since we're talking about that, you want to just go ahead and skip over to that conference and talk about them first?
Well, you want to talk about the Big Ten?
Yeah, let's go.
All right, let's go Big Ten.
So Big Ten. Since I already said my predicted Final 4, obviously I think the team that comes out of this Power 5 conference is Penn State. They've been playing dynamite this season. Saquon Barkley is a man who has been their entire offense. He's leading the team in rushing. He's leading the team in receiving. He's leading the team in passing, I think.
No, that's not true.
All right, it's McSorley, who's also pretty good, if you ever heard of him before. So I don't think. I mean, Ohio State's in the top 10 right now, but what have you heard from them in recent time? You hear about how great Penn State's been playing. You hear about how well Georgia's been doing. You hear about all these different teams, but what have you heard about Ohio State recently? Answer my question.
There hasn't been a lot to say about them. I mean, they lost to Oklahoma, who was their toughest opponent to date. They've beaten up on some of the other Big Ten schools thus far in the rest of their non-conference.
So they haven't been playing super impressive. They've been playing, I guess, how they should, except for that loss. I mean, they should have probably beaten Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So it's... And this is all just going off of buzz. Penn State definitely has a higher buzz right now than Ohio State. But I don't think they've done anything impressive that would lead me to believe that they'll beat a team like Penn State, who has dominated some of the best defenses in the country, or best defense in the country of Michigan.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, based on what you and I have both predicted, the winner of this weekend's game is going to go on and win the Big Ten and be in the playoff.
Neither of these teams better lose to Wisconsin. Wisconsin is a joke.
They better not lose to Wisconsin. That is correct. Wisconsin is not a joke, but they better not lose.
They're basically playing the same schedule as Western Michigan last year. At least same level of competition.
They are not playing a very tough schedule. I will give you that. But we'll get to that in a minute.
So, in conclusion, Penn State went out, you're there. Ohio State also, if they were to win out and beat Penn State, they would probably make it into the Final Four, but they'd also still have to beat Michigan State and Michigan. So, to Ohio State, good luck. And, that's really all I have to say about that. They'll have to beat Wisconsin if they make it to the conference championship, which, if they did make it to that, it should be a breeze. But you never know with them.
Yeah, you'll hear this a lot through the podcast today, but if most of these teams that we talk about, if they win out, you're probably going to be in, except for a few that we've got towards the end. But, I mean, winning out is the name of the game at this point. Any of these teams that can win these last 5-6 games of the year.
You're probably going to hear that a lot. I think the name of the game for all these teams is to win out. Every team.
That's the goal.
Besides a couple SEC schools, you pretty much can't afford to lose, especially Wisconsin. If you lose any games based off of your strength of schedule, you're going to get catapulted down the list of the top 25.
Yeah, I think
they're just waiting for that to drop.
Personally, I agree. Wisconsin hasn't played anybody. Their best win that I've seen so far, they beat Nebraska on the road by 21. But Nebraska is not. They may be a 500 team this year.
Yeah,
and that's their best win so far. I mean, they don't have any losses, but they do have to play Michigan soon, and they'll have to play probably Penn State or Ohio State, possibly Michigan State. But I don't think that'll happen in the conference championship. I think either way, I think Wisconsin probably ends up going to the conference championship undefeated in a spot to be in the playoff, and then they lose in the conference championship, which knocks them out of contention.
I'll ask you a different question.
Okay.
What would it take for the Big Ten to not be in there at all?
For the Big Ten to miss out completely would be very difficult in my eyes.
I'd enjoy it.
In my eyes, it would be very difficult, but they're out of the playoff. If Wisconsin loses before the conference championship game to Michigan or whoever else on their schedule, they go into the conference championship game with one loss, and then they beat whoever is in the conference championship, be it Ohio State, Penn State. As long as there's a team in there with one loss playing Wisconsin, a one-loss Wisconsin that wins the conference is probably not getting in because they just don't have a good schedule. That would be the only top 25 win they have, only quality win. And it's unlikely, but it's all possible that Penn State, Michigan State, and Ohio State can just beat up on each other and they all end up with 2 losses. It would be crazy, but it could happen.
How about we go over to the Pac-12?
Okay.
I don't think anybody's in there, as you already know. I said it at the pre-season special. Pac-12 has since started to implode. They've been beating each other up. I talked about it a lot last week. USC lost all hopes of making in there with their loss to Notre Dame. I don't think a 2-loss, unless a bunch of teams just start losing and there's no undefeated teams, I don't think a 2-loss team is going to make it into the playoffs. And with Washington State, I don't think they have the strength of schedule to recover. Again, it would take a lot of teams losing, like the Big Ten completely getting knocked out is a good start for them. But it would take that and more for them to make it back up in there and skip over anybody with their strength of schedules. Washington is ranked 63rd with their remaining schedule, and Washington State is number 74. So I don't think they're going to be impressing anybody to get into that playoff.
Yeah, it's the name of the game. You got to start scheduling better non-conference opponents if you're some of these Pac-12 schools. USC went and got Texas, which
What did they do last year?
5-7.
Oh.
They were ranked to start the year for whatever reason.
How are they doing so far?
Are
they over 500?
They're not doing great.
No.
I think they're right around the 500 mark. They still have an outside shot at the Big 12, but I severely doubt it, especially after that loss to Oklahoma. Yeah, the USC, right now, I don't have anybody in either. They're all kind of struggling at the point. Yeah, USC came in, they were a big favorite to start the year. They just got walloped by Notre Dame. Then they lost to Washington State as well. So they've got 2 losses already. They can't afford another loss. Even if they win out, they may not get in. It's a tough road for USC. Same for Stanford. Also 2 losses. They lost to USC by 18 and San Diego State by 3. San Diego State loss is looking worse and worse because they're not doing too well anymore.
No.
So,
yeah, I think Stanford has a better shot of getting to the playoffs than Washington or Washington State.
Also,
and I don't even think that happens because they have to play Washington State and Washington. And if they lose games besides Stanford this year, that's going to diminish that quality win. And then you're only sitting at a win over Notre Dame if you can beat Notre Dame. And then your conference championship against USC, which the way they're playing, if they lose another game, how good of a quality win is that?
yeah, I mean, USC is probably going to be in the conference championship just because of how weak the Pac-12 South is.
And how much you are in love with Sam Darnold.
No, the second place team in the Pac-12 South, I think, right now is Arizona. And Arizona State's right behind them. Neither of those teams is
Sam Darnold
good enough to be in the conference championship game. Arizona's on fire recently, but I don't think it continues. I think they lose this weekend. Honestly, Stanford's the best team right now in the Pac-12, at least from the eye test. The way they're playing right now, they're playing better than anybody else in the Pac-12 right now. Washington State just lost. USC just got clobbered. Stanford's playing the best out of the entire conference. The 2 losses is going to hurt them, though.
Strike that. Bryce Love is playing the best in the conference.
And they still have both the Washington schools, as you said, and then potentially a matchup against USC again in the conference championship. Like we said, we don't see anybody getting in. Pac-12 is definitely out of the playoff if a 3-loss team wins the conference championship.
If everything goes as it should, Pac-12 is out.
Yeah, and if Washington State lose again, it's over. They're in, however, if either Washington or Washington State win out.
You still think that?
Yeah.
So you disagree with me?
With 1 loss? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so.
With 1 loss, a Washington or Washington State team would sneak right in there. Because they would have beaten a ranked Washington or Washington State because they still have that game to play.
So let's say Penn State wins out and TCU wins out and
okay, so they're both
stays in there.
Okay,
right?
so
and then Notre Dame wins out. You think Washington or Washington State jumps any of them?
Oh, that's a tough one. They'd all have 1 loss. Notre Dame's loss.
Because you just said if they just went out, they're automatically in, which I don't think is the case at all.
I think so.
Who do they jump out of those 4 right there? It's out of right there, and that's not even including if Georgia wins out and happens to still be in there after the SEC championship.
No, if you have that many undefeated teams, Georgia's out. If they lose,
I agree with that too. But I mean that's. So if we peel back after these 4 teams I just listed, then you have like the Georgia in there and stuff like that.
No. If Notre Dame at 11-1 is up against a 12-1 Washington or Washington State, I think Washington or Washington State gets in because they won their conference.
What?
Yes.
Look at all the teams Notre Dame's beaten at that point. If they're 11-1,
Notre Dame has a great schedule,
and Washington does not. Think about the people who are making this decision. Look how they grade in recent years. How do you tell me Notre Dame gets picked, or Washington and Washington State gets picked over Notre Dame? Are you kidding me?
It's hard to tell what the committee is going to do. You don't know with the strength of schedule if that's more important than a conference championship. You don't know. You don't know what they're going to do. But
I know what they're going to do. They're going to pick Notre Dame.
I don't think so. You do realize who Notre Dame has to go through still, though, right?
Yeah, you just said though. If they go 11-1, exactly. That's all the more reason. If they're 11-1. How do they get jumped? TCU should get jumped before Notre Dame at that point.
An undefeated TCU should get jumped.
I don't think they would.
A conference champion undefeated TCU should get jumped.
I'm saying I don't think they would. But if Washington or Washington State just had to get there, if the committee had a hard-on for one of the Washington teams.
It's a fair point that Notre Dame has a good resume. And if they go 11-1, it's going to cause a lot of problems for the committee. Because you're going to take a team that is not affiliated with a conference, doesn't have a conference championship.
When you listen to this podcast, viewers, I want you guys to comment on Facebook if you think that 11-1 Notre Dame or Washington State, that's 11-1.
12-1 because they would have won the conference championship and they have an extra win.
Which one of those 3 teams deserves to be in the playoffs? consider strength of schedule. Yes, consider the championship, which in the Pac-12, when you're looking at who they're playing, 2-loss USC or in Arizona maybe, I don't think that championship really means as much as all the ranked teams that Notre Dame would have beaten. Think about it.
Okay. I mean, you've made your point on it perfectly clear. SEC. Jake loves the SEC, so just note that he is going to pick Bama and Georgia. And I'm going to do the same. So, I have an undefeated Bama and a 1-loss Georgia in my final prediction. Because I don't think Notre Dame's going to run the table. So you can just eliminate them from the discussion.
Notre Dame could easily not run the table. You're right.
Yes, they have some difficult games. I don't think that TCU is going to run the table either.
And I don't think Georgia's going to run the table up to Alabama, which is why I don't have Georgia in my final.
You think Georgia's going to lose? Who does Georgia going to lose to? They got Florida this week, which is always a tough game. I'll give them that. But they're 14-point favorites. Mm-hmm. Then they get Auburn. That's their only...
I think they're going to beat Florida easily. I've been at the Florida-Georgia game the last 4 years. I'm going again. Mm-hmm. I'm leaving tomorrow. To my brother's point, he keeps saying this like every chance he gets. It's kind of annoying at this point. But he says, the team that's supposed to win every year doesn't seem to in recent years. Which there's some value behind that statement. But I think it's a high schooler trying to play football against elementary school at this point.
Yeah, I mean, They got Florida. They got Georgia Tech, which is a rivalry game. So 2 rivalry games, you don't know what's going to happen. But then other than that, the only ranked team they play is Auburn.
I think there's a good chance Auburn can beat them.
I don't know about that.
I don't know. I just can see Georgia slipping up. I mean, when's the last time you've seen them have like such a great season?
Hey, it's a different coach.
It is, but still, I can see them slipping up.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely
They're still
could.
Overall a young team, and they're bound to make some mistake at some point.
Yeah, speaking of Florida, Georgia, I heard an interesting fact this morning. Since the 90s, I think it was the early 90s, I don't have the exact year, but Florida is winning the series 21-6. Might have been since 91 or 92. But 21-6 in favor of Florida. Georgia still leads the all-time, I think, 50-43, however, because Georgia dominated the early part of this rivalry. But it'll be an interesting game. I think 14 points is a lot for a rivalry game. Mm-hmm. If I had, money to, bet on games or whatever, per se.
You're spending your money on DraftKings instead.
Hypothetically, it would go towards Florida plus 14.5. I don't think Georgia necessarily blows them out of the water as they did some of the other schools they played earlier this year. I think Florida can hold their run game down a little bit and force them to throw the ball a little bit more. And I think Georgia's not going to score on every possession like they did against Mississippi State.
I'm so upset with Florida. I just want to say they're going to lose by like 30, but no, they're not.
That was a pretty high spread. That would be tough to swallow. McElwain might be gone if they do that.
Yeah, if they get blown out.
He wouldn't be fired immediately, but at the end of the year, it'd be people call him for his head.
So, I mean, we already know Bama and Georgia for SEC, so I don't... Just talk about your fun theory if what it would take for the SEC not to be in the playoffs.
Okay, but before we get there, let's just all... we talk about strength of schedule on here, and it's all fun and games. And we know Bama, if they go undefeated, is going to be in.
Because it's Alabama.
And because it's Bama. And we know if they lose one game...
They're going to drop to number 2.
They're going to be in the top 4 because it's Bama. So... Let me just say that their best win right now is against a 2-4 Florida State team. They have no wins against top 25 teams. And they may end up at the end of the year playing 1, maybe 2 ranked opponents.
Hey, the committee considers the fact that no ranked team wants to ruin their season playing against Alabama, right. So they can't get the good opponents.
Right, okay, well then let me go back to that argument with Washington and say nobody wants to schedule them, they're too good.
What?
Yeah, so,
are you high?
See, it's the same argument.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Washington State hasn't won national championships left and right in the last decade.
Yeah, well, they've been in every playoff. Congratulations, Bama, you've won 1 out of 3. That's not a very good percentage. Anyway, enough with the Bama hate because I'm sure nobody from Bama will ever listen to this podcast.
We had someone from Puerto Rico in the Week 1 podcast, so you never know.
Hey, he was from somewhere else. But anyway, you wanted me to get into the fun idea if the SEC is to miss the playoff.
Yeah.
Okay, this is going to be a doozy. Bama loses to either LSU or Auburn or whatever else cupcake they play between now and the conference championship. And then they go on to lose to a Georgia team or Florida team or South Carolina team or whoever with 2 or more losses. So Bama would have to lose twice, both of those losses being to a team that's not in the top 10, basically. Is what that's what that'd have to boil down to. Georgia would have to lose twice before the conference championship, like I just talked about. And Auburn would have to lose a game between now and the conference championship. So
you think if all that, but Auburn still only has 2 losses, you think they make it up there?
If Auburn wins out and they beat Georgia and Bama and then go on to win the SEC, then I think they're in. I know they're 19th right now, but beating number 1 Bama would probably put them close to the top 10. Not, beating a number 3 Georgia as well would put them in the top 6, 7.
Well, I agree, because we were talking about Stanford. If they won out, they have a chance. I think a 19 Auburn beating 2 top 4 opponents.
Yeah, they'd have to beat Bama, which would eliminate Bama from the conference championship, and then they'd have to beat Georgia, which they'd either face Georgia probably in that scenario, or Florida, or like I said, South Carolina in a weird scenario, coming out of the East. So it's very possible they'd have to play and beat 3 ranked opponents right there, almost in a row. So it's unlikely, but it's possible that Auburn could even sneak in the SEC, the one nobody's talking about.
That'd be hot.
Yeah.
Let's go over to the ACC, and Danny's freaking in love with the ACC,
okay,
so he's probably going to say like a shot team like Clemson's going to make it in there.
I see.
But I'm not going to, so let's go ahead and get into it.
For the record, I almost put that the ACC was going to get left out, and then I would have had to go and put like Notre Dame in or something stupid. So
who would have thought that?
Who would have thought?
Only an idiot thinks Notre Dame's going to make it up.
All right, so give me your unbiased ACC. Oh, never mind. Just hit us with your biased ACC opinion.
I thought I've actually remained pretty unbiased in this whole scenario.
You have.
I'm saying Florida sucks, and I've lost all hope with them.
You have.
So what do I have left to hang on to? Stanford's out of it. USF doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell.
Stanford's got a shot. They got Notre Dame still. That could be a big win.
Yeah. So I don't think anybody's going to make it.
As a matter of fact, I think they beat Notre Dame, but we'll get to that in a future week.
I'd be happy. I say Notre Dame's going to run the table now, and then a couple weeks from now, I'm going to say, oh, yeah, they're definitely going to lose.
Yeah, go Stanford.
Yeah.
All right, so go ahead.
Yeah, number 7 is Clemson. It is lucky that they're still in the top 10, but they do have a poor remaining schedule, so it's going to be hard for them to jump anybody unless there's some help with some losses. They need to win, and win so hard. They need to make a statement against a well-ranked NC State team. And then they're going to have to survive against Florida State, which I think is still going to be a tough game, even though they're only 2-4.
Hopefully.
And they're going to have to beat Georgia Tech, which they're never fun to play. So with that, NC State win and some of that, they could make some buzz with an ACC title to get back in there. So there's a chance. They're out of the other teams, the other Power 5 conferences where I said they're out, I'm pretty set on them being out. This one was a soft one. I struggled with it.
If Clemson wins out, they're in. No questions. No questions.
I didn't say that, but okay.
Well, I guarantee you that.
Because do they have to play Miami? Well, they'd have to play Miami in the championship, right?
Yeah, Miami or Virginia Tech, most likely.
So I think Miami. No, I don't think Miami wins out, but
I don't know. No.
They're number 8, but they're playing very poorly.
Yeah, they're not going to win out.
They don't have their starting running back anymore. They have to beat Notre Dame and underrated Virginia Tech. I don't even know if they're really considered underrated, but I don't hear a whole lot about them, so I'm going to call them underrated.
Yeah, I mean, they're a little underrated. Like you said, nobody talks about them. So they're kind of flying under the radar like Auburn over there.
But hey, if they do win out and they win the SEC title, they'll take Notre Dame's ticket into the top 4, and they could be in there. But I just don't think Miami wins out. They're bound to lose any day now.
Yeah,
they might even lose before their game.
I don't have a lot of belief in Miami either. Clemson, it really depends on what happens with Kelly Bryant, their quarterback. If he's healthy and he can come back and play 100%, they should be fine the rest of the year. If he's able to come back and he's only about 70, 75%, I feel like they're going to have another letdown game like they did against Syracuse, and that'll knock them out. Because the loss against Syracuse right now matched against some of these other one-loss teams, it's not good. It's not great.
No.
I mean, like you said, though, they'd have to go through NC State, Florida State, which Florida State not going to be a great win, but still would be something the committee could look at as not exactly a pushover type game. And then a ranked conference championship opponent. So,
and you know what? Since they're playing their little hearts out, let's give NC State and Virginia Tech love. Even though I did start off my notes with LOL.
Yeah.
NC State, do they have a chance to make the playoffs? LOL. They have to play Notre Dame and Clemson still. Virginia Tech, LOL. They only have a Miami who could very well have a loss by that game, and that's not going to help them get from number 13 to the top 4.
Yeah, Virginia Tech doesn't have a great schedule. Neither does NC State. I think it would hurt both of them in the long run. Clemson at least has beaten. They played Auburn in the non-conference. They beat them. That's a big win. And they've already beaten Virginia Tech.
They destroyed Louisville.
Yeah. Well.
Back when Louisville was supposed to be good.
Yeah, I mean, we all see that Lamar Jackson is still good, but the team, Louisville itself, not great. So
if Clemson loses, basically, ACC's out.
It would be...
And Miami. If Clemson and Miami lose.
If Clemson loses, they're out. NC State and Virginia Tech, even if they win out, would have some trouble, I think. And Miami would have to lose...
A game.
If they lose to Notre Dame, it gets a little interesting. If that's their only loss, but I still think it would put them on the...
Probably very late in the season.
the 5 to 8 range, probably, at the end of the day. So I think that they do need a team to win out in order to get a team in the playoff, which sucks because the ACC was so great last year. But it's just how it goes sometimes.
Now let's talk about the shittiest of the Power 5.
Okay.
Big 12.
All right. I have them getting left out.
TCU or bust.
Yeah, it is very possible that Iowa State, the Cyclones, could win the Big 12 this year. I don't think it's going to happen, but if they do, none of the Big 12 schools are getting in. It's basically down to TCU, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State, and even if Oklahoma and Oklahoma State went out, I don't know for sure that they would get in. TCU...
But Oklahoma's Baker Mayfield, Danny, your boyfriend.
They do have Baker Mayfield, and he is fantastic.
My co-host would probably soil himself if he was in a room with Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold.
There you go. Look, they're great.
And Drake.
They're great talents, and he's also a great talent, but for different reasons. Anyway, Oklahoma has a big win against Ohio State, which could help them if they win out. Oklahoma State really doesn't have that signature win. They do have 4 potential ranked opponents left on their schedule, so it would be interesting. They get West Virginia, Oklahoma, Iowa State, who's newly ranked, so we'll see how long that lasts, and then a potential conference champion opponent that would be ranked. So it's just the top 2 from the Big 12 this year. So right now it's Iowa State and I think Oklahoma, maybe Oklahoma State. I don't know.
Since TCU's, my whole opinion is since TCU's already number 4, they have obviously the best chance if they keep playing like they are. I don't see them losing. Beat the crafty Iowa State and Oklahoma. You already kind of said all this stuff. For Oklahoma, yeah, you're right. The only chance, I think, them beating TCU will calm the committee's tits about the close games that they're having. But then they'd also have to beat West Virginia, Oklahoma State, and that wouldn't be so fun. So I don't think anybody really has a chance to get back up to the top 4, except for TCU to have to remain there. And if they lose, they're going to drop out pretty easily. So keep going, horny frogs. And then for fun, we ended some non-Power 5 stuff. I'm not going to talk about Notre Dame since we already got into it, and Danny, got his panties in a bunch about it. But yeah, I think Notre Dame's in there, and they're non-Power 5. They're not a conference at all because they're with like BYU and Army in their own non-Power 5, just hanging out in the alley with their leather jackets.
The Notre Dame.
I kept calling them...
Notre Dame is a problem. Let's just all call this for what it is.
I called Notre Dame the ACC's redheaded stepchild.
If I was the NCAA and I was watching this season closely and I wanted to avoid any problems when it comes down to the Final Four and all that, pay the refs in the Notre Dame game. That's all I'm saying. Get Notre Dame out of there. They're causing too many problems right now in terms of, you heard our argument earlier. You could make that argument with Notre Dame versus Georgia, Notre Dame versus Clemson, Notre Dame versus any conference championship, any conference champion with 1 loss. And you can make that argument. And so Notre Dame is a little bit of a problem right now. I hope to see them lose in the coming weeks. They still have a lot of tough opponents left.
Yeah. And to get one thing clear, I really do not like Notre Dame. I really don't like it. I think it's cheap how they are. My only thing was with Washington State. And I'm going to keep interrupting Danny because he's trying to interrupt me first.
I think Wimbush is pretty good. We'll see what he turns into next year.
Well, you heard it here first. Danny can't stop thinking about Bush.
Okay. The other schools in the non-Power 5 that, they don't really have a chance. USF and UCF, they're both undefeated, though. So they deserve to be in the conversation at least. But they will not. They will not get in, no matter what happens. They will not get in.
So let me kick up my feet for this one. I did some thinking
Okay.
for USF.
Okay.
Wouldn't it be cool if Bama loses to LSU or Auburn, then Georgia loses to Florida and Auburn?
So Bama falls. Bama falls after losing to LSU or Auburn to like 4 or 5. Okay.
And then Georgia loses to 2 teams, and I said Georgia beats Bama, but any SEC East team beats Bama, so that knocks out the SEC, right? Then Penn State loses to Ohio State, who then loses to Michigan State, who lost to Penn State. So then that kind of screws up.
So Penn State loses to Michigan State. That's their loss.
Penn State loses to Ohio State.
Okay, so that's their 1 loss. Ohio State loses to Michigan State, putting them with 2 losses, pretty much knocking them out.
And then Michigan State lost to Penn State to lose any chance of Michigan State.
Michigan State's out. So then you have Penn State and Wisconsin basically duking
yes,
it out.
and then Wisconsin loses to any 2 opponents.
Okay, so they're out.
Yeah. Then Miami loses to Virginia Tech, who loses to a 2-loss Clemson in the title game.
Okay.
All right. Then NC State loses to Notre Dame.
Okay.
All right. Then Oklahoma State, TCU, and Iowa State all just kind of beat each other up, make it any chance you want to where Iowa State and West Virginia go to the Big 12 title game.
Okay, so I can see where the Big 12's out there. I can see where the ACC's out. I can see where the SEC's out.
Mm-hmm. And then,
but then again, with all these teams losing, it might put some people back into the talk.
Yeah, good. I just said it wouldn't be cool if, and USF's in front of it. USF still may not even make it, but it'd be fun.
That scenario would be complete chaos and complete anarchy in the top 25.
And then Pac-12 keeps doing what they're doing, but Stanford ends up taking the title. And let's say they lose one other game, but still win the title. So Pac-12's like done. So then USF and UCF play each other after Thanksgiving, and USF beats them. And they're both undefeated at the game. So at this point, they're probably close to the top 10 right now. They're probably like sitting at 10 and 11.
What's funny is in this scenario, you have no 1-loss teams.
Yeah.
You have 0 1-loss teams, and these 2 undefeated teams will have to play.
That's what it takes for an AAC team to make it up there.
Yeah, maybe if they played a better non-conference, but you would have these 2 AAC teams playing against each other.
And they should, at this point, they should at least be at like 8 and 9
to get into their conference championship game, and then have to play Memphis or Navy or somebody.
I'm a USF fan, so I said USF. You could do this exact same scenario, but say UCF beats USF.
It's even tougher for UCF because I think, if I'm correct, they only played 11 games this year because one of their games got canceled and not rescheduled. So they only have 11 games, which makes it a little tougher.
And the only reason why USF had 12 is because they had week 0 games. So USF beat UCF, who was ranked at the time. Let's call them both like 8 and 9 at that game. And then they go on to defeat a ranked Memphis for the AAC title. This would leave an undefeated USF, in my opinion, a 1-loss Notre Dame.
A 1-loss Notre Dame's in.
Yeah. A 1-loss Penn State. And then maybe a 2-loss non-champion Auburn in the Final Four. Do you think USF makes it in there after all that?
Probably not, to be honest with you. They probably push some 2-loss teams ahead of them, honestly.
Let's put them at number 5.
A 2-loss like Ohio State or 2-loss like Oklahoma or something like that.
That's so messed up.
Yeah, it would suck.
They're willing to put Wisconsin in there.
Hey, guess what? You gotta play somebody. At some point in the season, you gotta play somebody.
Wisconsin didn't.
They're going to in their conference championship.
Well,
and Wisconsin, there's talks that if Wisconsin goes undefeated, they will not get in, which is still a possibility. I don't see that personally, but there's talks that if Wisconsin goes undefeated, they still don't get in because of that week schedule. But a USF team who doesn't have to play... They played a Big Ten school named Illinois, who shouldn't even be in the Big Ten.
Lovie Smith.
Oh, my God. They're so bad. USF doesn't have a good win.
No, they don't. I'm not going to argue with that one. But if they beat UCF and they both happen to be in the top 10 because of that chaos scenario, then they have a top 10 win all of a sudden, and then they beat a ranked Memphis, and everyone has 2 losses except for the 3 1-loss teams. I mean, it's a good case.
Yeah, I made some cases as to reasons why teams don't get in. I could do it for most teams. These were just kind of predictions. I think Auburn loses to Georgia and Bama, which puts Bama and Georgia both in good position.
So who do you think ruins it for Notre Dame?
For Notre Dame,
who's the one that puts the nail in the coffin for them?
I want to say that they could lose to Miami, but I have a harder time saying that. I think they lose to Stanford. I think the way Stanford's playing right now, I think they can beat them.
Yeah.
And I think Stanford's defense would make a difference in that game. Keep Notre Dame.
The Notre Dame-Stanford games are always exciting, and
Yeah.
I think Stanford's won the last few.
I think Stanford could keep it a low-scoring game, and I think Bryce Love. Nobody's proven that they can stop him, and I don't think Notre Dame's got the defense to do it. So, was it Oregon that they played recently, like 2 weeks ago?
Yes,
Where he ran for over 100 yards in the first 8 minutes of the game, and
Yeah,
then finished with 140
Before
yards.
halfway through the first quarter, he already had, I think, 117 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, he only finished with 144. He's such a scrub through the second and fourth quarters.
Yeah.
But
It's because they stopped playing him in the third.
he's playing real well right now. He's got a decent shot at the Heisman. Penn State keeps playing these high-profile games, though. Then the voters are just going to see Barkley. They're not going to see Bryce Love playing at 10 o'clock every day or every week.
They're playing at 9 o'clock tonight. That's earlier than normal.
Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit earlier, but I still don't think, because of the weak Pac-12, like you were talking about, he's just not going to get enough coverage to win it. Unless Barkley goes and has a terrible week or two, I think it's probably his to lose.
Well, if he didn't have a bad game against Michigan's defense, I don't see who he would have a bad game against, unless he just happens to... One of his wheels gets blown out.
He was struggling against Iowa for a long time and then broke a big one.
Yeah.
So, it can happen. There's just so many ways he can beat you. Yeah. So, I think that about wraps up our playoff preview special.
Yeah.
Here on the new and improved BYSC podcast, which will now only be featuring college football.
Yes. They will be a little bit shorter. And next week we'll go back to I would say normal format, but since we're not doing other stuff, it's going to be a little different. We're still going to do a top 10.
Yeah, we'll tweak it.
The top 10 is going to be a little bit different. We're going to have some more smaller things in the top 10 that are fun to talk about.
Yeah.
Not just talk about just game recaps and stuff. We're going to try and spend a little bit more time on the week ahead since we record these things on Thursdays.
I love game recaps.
I love you.
Oh, Jesus Christ, that one too. I love game recaps. So they're going to be around. Anybody else who loves the game recaps, don't worry, they'll be here.
Just not as much.
Bye. I'm your host, Dirty Jake, with me, Danny Dishner, and that is it for today. Thank you for joining us, and good night.